All right, guys, been getting a lot of questions on how to turbocharge a Ford Fusion. This is a 2.5 liter, so it's completely different than the V6, and it's front wheel drive. So starting out, obviously you're gonna need a turbo. So for the turbo manifold, this is the exact flange that the Mazdaspeeds use. They just have a couple more bolt holes right here. So any manifold that you want from a Speed 3. My current setup is a eBay tubular manifold to the stock KO4 from a Speed 3, and it has an internal wastegate, so you just need a boost controller. For the oiling setup for the turbo, what I have right now is a 4AN line that's mounted to a oil sandwich feed plate, so that goes between the filter and the actual housing. For the location for the feed, you can go any way you want. So you can go underneath the oil pan right here. There's a little notch in this one and in the newer 2.5, or you can go over the bell housing for the transmission, underneath the coolant feed block, distribution block. And for the length of this, it measures out to about 43 inches from right here all the way to the other side. And then this is a Banjo Bolt. This is specific for the Speed 3 turbo, and it has a restrictor bolt in it. You really don't need that much oil going into your turbo. And for the drain for the turbo, obviously it's going to depend, all of these lengths are going to depend if you go top mount or bottom mount and what turbo you use, but I believe this is a 38mm flange. And for sizing on these, you can either go 8 AN or 10 AN. This one currently is an 8 AN, but I'm going to step it up to a 10 AN and move the drain to the block right here rather than right here. This is where the axle support goes for the passenger side. So the 90-degree currently was coming into contact with that, so it's not completely downward at all times. As you can see, turbo would be right about there. So we're gonna do 10 AN for that, and instead of having it welded in, I'm just gonna have it tapped into that oil pan. The older 2.5, this is the flattest part and it comes out the most, versus back here it comes a lot further down. And with tapping a drain for an oil pan, you want it to be as high as you possibly can get it, so it doesn't fill up with oil. You know, if it's right down here, it's gonna be filled up to oil till there. And keeping it as straight as possible, not trying to go vertical at all, is the best course of action. So whatever you do, you're gonna wanna have a 90-degree off of it. If you do wanna go the welding route, this is an aluminum pan. All of them are. As far as catch can setups go, if you're only on low boost, you probably won't need a catch can, but I would put one in just to be safe anyways. The two locations for that are underneath the intake manifold. So right here, there's a plate that goes in, and that has a PCV valve that goes from there right to the intake manifold. So this is the stock location for that PCV valve to go into, and this is what an aftermarket plate looks like, and this is what the stock plate looks like. So it mounts up just like this, and then it goes in the intake manifold. My setup right now is using this plate and using this PCV hole. It's a Diamond PCV plate for a 2.325, same part. And then that comes down into the catch can. And the other place to mount a line for your catch can would be right here. This is the valve cover There's also a PCV valve right here that goes to the intake manifold. It's your preference if you want to go vented or non-vented. I'm going vented just because I was having some blow-by issues with this motor with the blown rings. Couple places you could mount this. Behind the left driver's side fog light, there's a big open space right here. You can mount it right here. That's where I had it before. You could also put it right here. You could either drill through this. This is the strut tower mount. There's some stock holes here. You could also just make a bracket going here to here. The valve cover is right here though, so you have to make it a little bit further back. You could also put it up here somewhere, or you could put it down here, but there's a lot less room. Also, in terms of oil catch can setup, I would go with a nice catch can, not an eBay one, especially if you're doing vented, because these aren't rated for lots of blow-by, or I don't believe they're rated for vacuum. So there's oil all over, and you can see how nasty this is, and it was leaking out everywhere, and yeah. As far as motor mounts go, if you're higher mileage, I would definitely suggest replacing 2, if not all, of the motor mounts. So there's the passenger side motor mount, there's the rear dog bone mount, and then there is the transmission mount, which goes right on top of the trans. I just replaced this dog bone mount. It really helped with wheel spin, and I think I'm gonna replace the passenger mount, and I definitely need to replace the trans mount. 180,000 miles, and it's completely ripped in half. I need a new one of those, and the passenger mount is super duper wiggly, so I'm gonna need another one of those too. As far as fueling, your stock injectors and fuel pump could probably handle 15-20 pounds. Above that, I would upgrade injectors at least to be safe. I haven't tested the limits of the fuel pump and the stock injectors, but I'm on these works right here just to be safe. They're 550cc injectors. Intercooler piping goes. This is a 2-inch outlet right here for the turbo, but I'm running 2.5-inch half-inch piping. There are 2 ways you can set this up. You can go overhead or underhead. With the setup, it's kind of dependent on what turbo you're running. If you're running a KO4 or anything that shoots up like this, you're gonna need to go over the valve cover. Let's get one of these 90 degrees. This is a 2-inch to 2.5-inch, like I said. And then it goes over the valve cover like this. And then it goes down right in front of the motor. And then it squeezes right in front of the AC compressor. There will be a small fitment issue with the transcooler lines right against this front subframe. So you might just want to get some zip ties and pull that back to the subframe. And then after that, you can go down right here and around into the intercooler. And for my intercooler setup, it's also 2.5-inch. This is a 2.5-inch by 27 by 7.5-inch. It fits really well in the stock grill. I just had to do a little trimming for this and this right here. And I welded some tabs onto the stock crash bar right here, and then also onto the subframe back. Those aren't as sturdy, but these are the ones you definitely need on the top. And from the intercooler, it comes around right here. I'll show you in a second, and up like this into the intake manifold. I have my boost gauge right off of that, and the boost controller line off of right here. With the crash bar and radiator in place, there's a hole right here that you can fit the intercooler piping right into, and then it comes up and around. The 2.3 intake manifold, the throttle body for that is on the bottom of the intake manifold, but the 2.5, it's at the very top. In terms of the intake side of the turbo, it's also a 2-inch. I'm doing a 2.5-inch piping that comes around the battery and comes out. It's a really tight fit back there. The Mazdaspeed stock intake, it's smaller, but it flattens up right here. It's an ovaloid shape, so you can fit it between the battery and then it opens up again. A lot of aftermarket intakes for the Mazdaspeed will work. Depending on how you route your intercooler setup. A stock or aftermarket Mazdaspeed intake comes around the battery, and then the filter's right there, but that's where your intercooler piping needs to be. It's the flange, so different for the MAF sensors. This is a Mazdaspeed MAF, and that's a Ford MAF. If you want to run any more boost than about 10 pounds, you'll need something larger than a 2.5-inch intake. 3-inch intake would be fine. There's couplers that are sold online that have the MAF housing right here, and then you can just buy a 3-inch universal filter and then use a coupler and connect that to the Mazdaspeed intake piping. Or as exhaust side of the turbo, a Mazdaspeed 6 downpipe will work. This one is from a Speed 6. You'll need to custom at least make a mid pipe from this to the stock exhaust. This is a 4-inch right here, and it connects to the turbo right there. There's a flex pipe right there, and then the O2 sensors are here and right up there. And you can get these catted or non-catted. This one's from eBay, and it doesn't have a cat. It was like 200 bucks. As far as tuning goes, I have an SET X4, and I was tuned by Unleashed Tuning. You're going to want to also have a boost gauge, because you can't hook up the Mazdaspeed boost sensors and boost controllers to the stock ECU. And the automatic versus manual transmissions, I've heard that manual transmissions can handle 350, 400, 450 horsepower, versus the automatics, they start to act up at about 300. Ford rates the second gen 6 F35, which is the 6-speed automatic transmission, for about 350 horsepower and 375 pound-feet of torque. What you can do to make the most out of this is have the torque converter locked up in first and second, or you can get a 2-liter EcoBoost torque converter from the newer Fusions, Edges, all of those Ford products. I think the slip is a little bit different than these. And in terms of shifting, you can get a zip kit from either Sonax or something else. I just look up 6F35 zip kit on eBay, and that's basically a restrictor plate that goes in the valve body. In terms of additional cooling, if your car is at over 100,000 miles, I just recommend getting a new radiator. These radiators are dual coolant cooler as well as transmission cooler. These are the trans lines right here. These have trans fluid in them, and these are for the engine coolant. If you have an automatic, I recommend going for an aftermarket trans cooler. These are 1/2 inch line, so that 8AN bracket sits is like this on the transmission, then it comes down. So I'd recommend splicing it about right here or up here after it comes off the transmission, then routing it over and in front of the actual radiator. As far as oil cooling goes, I would get a sandwich plate with 2 10AN lines right here, and then 2 1/8-inch NPT right here. The 1/8-inch NPT will be used for your 4AN lines for your turbo feed, and then the front 2, the 10AN lines, will be for the oil cooler. From factory, the KO4 is cooled by coolant and has oil going through it as well. So these are the coolant lines. And there's one on the back, and then the rest is oil. But because we can't really make a coolant setup right here, these are plugged. And I don't really feel like getting a block from a Speed to do that. It's just oil cooled. So I would highly recommend a oil cooler, as your oil will get super dirty and nasty after only a couple thousand miles if you don't. And yeah, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to comment down below or DM me on my Instagram, which is at JR_Fuse. I should be making a video within the month of this thing running on some higher boost levels with all of these new upgrades. So I'm doing trans cooler and oil cooler, more boost, new engine mounts. And yeah, thanks for watching.